Many of the capabilities of the Active Directory integrated zone are not really things you can observe. It's more just knowing how it actually works and that it replicates with Active Directory. But what I can do is create another zone. So I'm going to do new zone again. This time I'm going to leave it as an Active Directory integrated zone. So primary and this checkbox at the bottom, store the zone in Active Directory, available only if your DNS server is a writable domain controller, which this is. So I'm going to choose next for that. Now it says, who should this replicate to? To all DNS servers running on domain controllers in this forest? To all DNS servers running on domain controllers in this domain? Now that's actually the default. The third option we ignore. To all domain controllers in this domain for Windows 2000 compatibility. We don't use Windows 2000 domain controllers, so that's an unrealistic option. Typically, we leave it on to all DNS servers on domain controllers in this domain, and it just replicates to those domain controllers in the rtsnetworking.com domain. Well, I'm going to choose next for that. Now it says, what do you want to name this? Well, I'm going to name this amf.net. And I'll just click next. We referenced dynamic updates earlier. We said dynamic updates gave us this secure dynamic update option if you're using an Active Directory integrated zone. That actually means it will only register your client computers if they are members of your Active Directory domain. If they are in a work group or they're a mobile device or something like that, they can still resolve names through your DNS server, but they will never be registered as a host A, a host quad A, any of those types of records. We will never register those devices. That's the default for Active Directory integrated zones. The default for our primary was do not allow dynamic updates. So I'm going to leave that on allow only secure dynamic updates. And we would be done. So now I have amf.net. If I now go back to the properties of this amf.net, I can see the type. So a neat thing you can do, I can change this. So it's Active Directory integrated. If I wanted to, I could say, no, I want this to be a primary zone. So I could deselect store the zone in Active Directory and OK. It says, do you no longer want this zone to be Active Directory integrated? I'll say yes. Now it's a primary zone and all the replication options will grayed out. Likewise, when I created Atlantis.local, we made that a primary zone. So if I go to the properties of that, you can see it's primary, which is the way we created it. But if I go to change, I can simply click this box, store the zone in Active Directory, and OK. Do you want this to become Active Directory integrated? Yes, I do. Now it's an Active Directory integrated zone. If I go to replication, I can manage those same three options we just saw. So you will never be in a point where you need to delete a zone and recreate it because you want to change the replication scope or the zone type or anything like that. All those can be changed at any time. And I can also change the dynamic updates at any time. So right now this is on none for dynamic updates. But because this zone is now Active Directory integrated, I can choose secure only, or we could choose all, which is the non-secure and secure. Pretty fascinating. Now I don't have a need for either of those zones we just created, so I'm just going to delete both. Now, a neat thing with the Active Directory integrated zone, when you delete it, that replication is deleted. So if you have 6 domain controllers that all have a replicated copy of this zone, you only need to delete it on a single domain controller, and it's going to replicate to all the others that this zone has been deleted. And once replication occurs, it'll just disappear off all your domain controllers. Now, the secondary zone, you would have to manually delete those. Now, if I expand my RTS serve 1, I did add it to the same console, but if I refresh that view, I did add the stub zone. Well, we added a secondary zone, then we created a stub zone, but if I expand forward lookup zone, I can see that Atlantis.local. If I go to properties, I can see that it says stub, and you also see that here. So I can remotely do everything we were doing on RTS Serve 1 by pulling it up. You could have done all that remotely. Create zones, you could create records, so full remote management capability. But stub zones and secondary zones, they manually have to be deleted. So I'm going to delete that stub zone off RTS Serve 1.